Burns.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Film Vaulters. I am Mitch Burns, or the Mitch Burns, whatever you want to call me. And I'm here today with special guest Will Lindis. On the pod, you like to go by Will usually.
Yeah,
Um,
Will's great. Yeah.
okay, okay. Will, he has a podcast called the Movie Bears Podcast. It is a very funny, quippy show. You three get along, and it's like, or maybe you don't. I don't know.
No.
It's you, Brad, and Jim, right?
That's right. That's right.
Usually on every episode, and you guys are very funny. You guys just have a rapport, and well, I think you know it. And so Jim and Brad are together.
Correct.
Is that's correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so your partner never jumps on the pod.
No, we have a setup where we've been doing this show, Movie Bears podcast, since 2012, right? And
Wow, that was my next question.
yeah, and Brad and Jim are they're married, they're a couple, and I'm the I don't want to say third wheel, but I'm the third leg of that stool. We'll say, my husband will come with me to some of the movies that we see, but he doesn't pop onto the show, and we occasionally have guests, but usually it's a three-hander.
Yeah, and wow, so you've been doing it since 2012. That's got to be an enormous amount of episodes. Like 2000. What do you like? Well, I don't know. Like that's crazy.
We just recorded episode 520.
520. Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say 2000 seems a little crazy, but yeah, 520. I mean, good for you guys. Good for it's so anyone. I don't know if you can plug it at right now. Let us know where people can find it, and we'll plug you again at the end.
Absolutely. So it's Movie Bears Podcast. We have a website, moviebearspodcast.com. But I think most people don't go to the website. Most people are just going to pull up on, Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on any of, I guess Stitcher's dead now, but any of those different like podcasting platforms. Just look for Movie Bears Podcast on there. We have a big back catalog there. I believe that usually you can only catch like the most like recent 100 episodes because that's just the way those things work. But still, that's a couple years of content.
Yeah, no, I mean, and then if you need more, I guess you could reach out to Will and say, "Hey, let us pay for more or something." Come on.
Yeah, the rest are up on the website. So that's like if you want to go back and find out how we felt about like Hansel and Gretel witch hunters in 2013. That does exist. But yeah.
Oh man, I know my co-host at the Hollywood Persona, he texted me yesterday, and he was like, "What was that movie that you, me, and Anderson from the Film Vault everybody liked from the Film Vault, but it got no press?" And we had to go back into our episodes, and it was To Catch a Killer with Shailene Woodley. I don't know if you saw that one, but yeah. So we were going through our old episodes to try to figure out what it was. So I get that. And so I don't know if you do you want to explain what a bear is? Do you or are we just gonna say to pretend to everyone that it's a bear like that you see in the woods?
That's I mean, that would be an amazing if someone was listening to this entire episode and still at the end was just like, what the hell is a bear? So it's within queer cultures, LGBTQ communities. There's a lot of subcultures, and one of them is the bear community, and that's generally considered what we call husky, hairy, huggable homos. In other words, it's like it's a very particular like brand and type of gay dude or male presenting person, right? And there's a lot of community within the bear community. There are groups that are bear groups that are in different cities that will go and see movies together. They'll buy tickets, like 10, 15 seats at a block of whatever the new release is. And our focus is really the idea of like, well, what if we were at one of those and we were then just hanging out after the movie and just chatting about what we just saw? And that's kind of our structure. So the movies that we watch, while we do try to focus on LGBTQ films where we can, when we can,
Yep.
sometimes it's slim pickings, right? And so most of the time, it's just wherever the multiplex film of that week is. You know, if
Yep.
there's a new Transformers movie or a new Marvel movie or whatever it is, you know, we're talking about that. And if there isn't, then we get to kind of dig into some of those like indie or streaming choices that are maybe less popular, but definitely more interesting to talk about. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I love the pod, and yeah. So anyone listening, I was just gonna say, obviously, if you don't know from the title, we're doing top five LGBT movies, and I didn't realize until today that Anderson and Brian over at the Film Vault, which we are a spin-off podcast of the Film Vault, the Film Vaulters, they've never done top five LGBT movies, um, but they've done top five gay characters in way back in 2013. And then, but in October 2022, they did top five tropey gay characters, which I do remember. It's a very funny episode with
mhm.
some, like, and I sent in one, I think, and so it's a good, it is a good episode, and they may have done LGBT or something similar, but I couldn't find it. But what we are kind of doing today is Will and I want to shine some light on the more uncommon LGBT movies. Um, and I am like a new gay, I guess. I'm bisexual, so I think I'm personally going to be very open on this episode about stuff, and I think
Sure,
I think you're pretty open as well.
absolutely.
So I'm bisexual. I whatever. I belong in a few little different categories along the LGBTQIA plus. Is it supposed to be IA?
QIA, and then sometimes there's another A. It really just depends on how far down the rabbit hole you go. But yeah,
Yeah, I like to. I personally like to let everyone know that obviously everything along that line, I good. Good, it's there, but I try to just say LGBT because we don't need to be repeating that lengthy thing over and over again. But no one should be discluded. Um. So yeah. So we are. Oh man, I was going somewhere with that. So what am I then? What I don't. I've always wondered. Like I mean, I'm clearly not a bear. I like, and I know there's like otter and twink and stuff like that. I mean, I weigh 150. I mean, but I'm older. I'm 35 now, so I mean, not really a twink. I don't know.
so much of it really is comes down to like self-identification, right? Because
Yeah, yeah,
if it falls too much under like letting other people define it, then it sort of defeats the purpose, right?
yeah, yeah. You're
We
right.
came to grips with who we are and our identities and where we stand right now, and those
Yeah,
things may shift. But
yeah,
so I mean, yeah, there's an animal for every body shape, between bears and
yeah,
otters are like skinny bears, and then there's
yeah, yeah.
dolphins who are like they're like
Hairless.
hairless, and then you got twinks and you got chaser, you got all sorts of different things. You just kind of pick where you feel most comfortable.
And yeah, and that's totally true because it's like you either want to put a label on yourself or you don't. And
Right.
I'm fine with the people who say, "Oh, I don't need labels." And the ones who do, it's like, "Yeah, well that's helping you find your identity," or you don't really care because you're just somewhere along the line and you're happy with who you are. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, yeah, so what I was going to say also, we are going to be talking about top five like more underrated uncommon. Now I feel like a child whenever I record with someone because all my movies are technically newer, but that's okay because I like to shine a light on newer movies that people probably missed. um, so I'm really really excited to hear your list, which I'm going to get you to send me after, and
Yeah.
because there are probably five movies that I need to see. And we do have a little bit of a pretty big listener list. And so, just do you think that we reject some of like the higher rated LGBT movies, like the ones that really dig into the pop culture stream, such as like Call Me by Your Name, or like Power of the Dog? Do you think, like, I find myself, and I don't know why, but I like I really resisted against Call Me by Your Name. So I don't know. I'd like to get your
Yeah.
opinion on that.
It's hard, right? Because I think that whenever you're a part of a subculture that is used to existing for years on, like, let's be honest, like we exist on the margins, and
Yeah, the
we've been
fringe. Yeah.
marginalized, right? And so because of that, we have years and years and decades of films that the content had to either be subversive, it had to be hidden, it had to be more metaphorical, or if it did exist, it existed in sort of fringe or kind of um,
Very
more,
indie.
yeah, indie kind of punk, kind of like
Yeah.
outside of things. So when you start to see that become a part of the mainstream, there's sort of two things that go on in your brain. Like, one, like, hey, this is really cool, like,
Yep.
we're not as marginalized as we were before. But also at the same time, there's this protective, like, what's going to happen when people that are not a part of our community take and absorb this thing? Are they going to
Mhm.
be careful with it? Are they going to be respectful of it and the experience? Or are they going to subsidize it and commoditize it and turn it
Mhm.
into something that fits, their agenda instead of, our agenda, which is being able to create art that is truthful to who we are and our experience? So
Yeah.
I think that's where I land on those types of things, right?
Yeah.
I want to see film. I want to see more films in general that represent queer stories, and I want these to be positive. I want these to be negative. I want these to be indie. I want these to be blockbuster. I want everything in between, because you can only really have true representation if you're getting, your finger in all the pies.
Mhm.
At the same time, I want to make sure that queer voices, queer storytellers, writers, directors, actors are the ones that are not monopoly. I don't think I'm not one of those people who thinks that you have to be queer to be a part of the
Okay.
storytelling process,
Yeah.
but I do think that you have to have those voices involved in the storytelling
Agreed.
process.
So that was going to be my next question, but it actually greatly it evolves into my other question. Have you seen Amelia Perez?
I have seen Amelia Perez. That's the hot buttons movie right now, right?
It is, and I would just, since you've seen it, I have as well. I watched it 2 nights ago, the night of the Golden Globes. I would just love to hear your thoughts on it, and just remember this is a safe space, unlike cinematics. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. I know that we had a conversation in there the other day. There's a lot of people who didn't like it, and a lot of people like myself who did, and and that's fine. So, your thoughts?
I split the middle on it. I know there's a lot of people who are kind of calling it like the new, like, you know um Crash or Green Book, or
Right,
one of those types of movies that makes it farther into the award season than it has any right to do.
right.
And maybe there's some truth in that. I think what we have here is a movie that is well intentioned, that fumbles its execution.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't, I've seen stories that tell trans narratives with spite, with malice, or with obliviousness, and I don't think that's what's happening here.
I
It does
agree.
fall a little bit into the, like, I don't want to spoil too much about the movie.
Right.
Yeah, I guess what's the take here, right? Because I want to talk a little bit about it, but I don't want to ruin it if anyone's listening here. But it falls into some tropes, I guess we'll say that are some negative
Yeah.
tropes.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. We did the live episode. We did a live episode last night, and one of my friends, Mike, he commented. He said the the reason, um, no, the movie wasn't bad. No, they didn't treat the LGBT issues wrong. It's just the thing that was bad was the movie itself, which
Right.
was wrong to the LGBT. And it's like me and Ant at the Hollywood Persona, we said like we both liked it. We gave it 3.5 stars, like a little bit
Hmm.
above average, or whatever you want to say. And but we can completely understand why somebody would dislike it. Like some of the songs are just god awful.
Right.
And yeah, there is some tropes and stuff, and the way there is the trans situation is used. Some people could see it a certain way, and some people could see it another way. But yeah, I overly enjoyed it, and I don't know who to recommend this movie to either, though, because I think I've talked to people in our community that haven't liked it, and straight people who've liked it, and whatever, right? So, um, yeah, so that's I just wanted to get your opinion on
Yeah,
that.
it's I think the audience for it is, there are better films that tell this type of story, but everyone has to start somewhere,
Hmm.
and on sort of like opening the door to queer cinema, right?
Yeah,
Which is a large filmography, but it's also sort of like narrowly focused in where you can find these stories. This is a film that's received awards, has received buzz, and is on Netflix, right?
yeah,
And so with
exactly.
those types of
Easily
things,
available.
it's accessible, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I agree with you completely. I think the biggest issue I really had with this movie, more so than the issues and the subject matter and all of that, was just it felt like it was so briskly edited that I never had enough time to really settle into any scene before it
yeah,
whisked me away to another one. So
yeah.
it
Very
needed another
unfocused.
cut.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like at the end of it, I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying this, but if this was just edited and just more fine tuned, I like this could have been great. Um, I guess I'm not shocked that it won Best Drama Musical. I think if the but I was a little because Wicked has so much heat under it, and like I haven't talked to anyone who really doesn't like it. I don't
Yeah.
know if you didn't or you probably did, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, but
Okay,
that's,
me too.
yeah, Big loved it. But when you start looking at kind of Golden Globes, and you start looking at, Hollywood Foreign Press, and you start looking at kind of like that particular voting block,
Yeah,
I think a movie like Wicked, I'm not saying that they never vote for like the popularist, the populist
right.
candidate in this, but I do think a film like Wicked is something that if you're like a hardline, and I'm using these with air quotes that
Yep.
listeners might not be able to hear, but film critics might not always immediately gravitate towards on
Right.
their ballot. And I
Right.
think that I think that's the hill that Wicked's gonna have to climb.
Yeah. I wonder because I don't think there's any way that part 2 is as good as part 1. I
Yeah,
think they've definitely I don't think it's going to be bad. I just don't think there's any way they can live up to some of the songs and the moments in part 1 cuz a lot of us know what is part 2 is about.
yeah,
And so I don't see it winning the Oscar, but I think this is a movie to stand the test of time, and people are going to look back and see and whatever it loses to, people are going to look back and say, wow, I can't believe Wicked didn't win the Oscar, and it's like this classic today. Um so I don't know, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how it all rolls out. So one more thing before we move on. I just
mhm,
wanted to make sure I ask how you're doing. We are a big family, the Cinematics crew, the Film Vault crew. I find we are all a big family. We all like, even everyone is a big family, and people have reached out for me in the past about my mental health and stuff like that, and it's been so sweet. And if you are okay to share a little bit about what you're going through, you can, or I can completely cut this. And I will make myself look like an idiot. But yeah, I just want to make sure we find out how you're doing, and yeah,
yeah. Well, thanks for asking, and absolutely okay. I'm an open book on this,
yeah,
because this last year, 2024, was sort of my health journey. Specifically, I had a cancer diagnosis about midway through the year, and so between tumor on the pancreas and some lymph node stuff. I hit the last part of last year with just massive chemotherapy regimen, infusions once a week. As part of the bear thing, I used to have a big old beard. It's gone now. That's part of the side effects, but
yeah.
we pushed through. Doing okay right now. Looking at some other treatments. I've been posting a little bit about it on social media. There's some targeted gene therapy stuff that I'm hoping is successful. That I'm just sort of getting into some of the clinical trials on. So what I'm hoping is, and this kind of goes going back to kind of the film thing of it all, like I had a few months last year where I just really could not get out to the theaters. And so I was catching stuff when I can, where I could, but it really put a big dent in just like one of my favorite things to do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was able to kind of get used to the regimen and sort of get used to it towards the back end of the year and kind of get back on my normal being out at the cinema way too many times, way too often each week. So I'm really hoping to keep that up and sort of keep doing this thing that I enjoy, as long as my health will allow it.
Yeah, and we have just been obviously way too worried about you. So I'm happy to hear that you're doing well right now. We have tried to you and I
Yeah.
tried to get together a few times, and of course we tried to do it on your Wednesdays, and you messaged me and you're like, okay, dude, we got to stop trying to get together on Wednesdays. That's when I'm having my chemotherapy.
Yeah.
Please. I don't know why we keep doing that. And so I thought, so that was pretty funny, but I'm glad, not funny, obviously, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, no. No, it is
But
funny, Yeah.
yeah, I do that to myself too, where it's like, oh yeah, Wednesday works, and then I realize I have like my worst day of the year on Wednesdays, and I'm like, why did I pick that? I'm glad to hear that there is, a future, and we will obviously keep in touch, and we're all rooting for you. So,
There's a kind of a connection to why I had originally proposed those Wednesdays that actually goes back to Film Vault, which
oh,
is I would remember those episodes where Anderson would give Brian some shit about like on infusion days he was particularly like wired and kind of like a little bit more like kind of antsy, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have more energy on those days because that's what my doctors told me. Like, you're gonna be fine on infusion day. It's gonna be the days after. But what ended up happening was they also gave me an iron supplement, which just like that zaps you. So any extra
oh,
energy I would have had was getting drained immediately down by this other infusion I was getting. So, but yeah, I originally proposed that because I'm like, oh, but it'll be good energy. That's what Brian used to do.
yes, yes. That would have been interesting to have that conversation because I do remember those days, and even when Anderson wouldn't bring it up, I would know. I'd be like, why isn't Anderson giving him shit? Because this is definitely an infusion day, or
Yeah.
why isn't he not give him shit, but why isn't he asking if this
Yeah.
is an infusion day? Because I even know now that this is an infusion day.
Yeah.
So yeah, so anyways, we're all thinking about you, all the Cinematics and Film Vault family. Anybody who is listening to this that isn't a part of our Cinematics Facebook group, come join us there. You'll hate half of us, you'll love the other half. It all depends on your personality. So anyways, top 5 queer films, on underrated queer films.
Yes.
So couple questions I always ask before we get into it, and people are probably like, "Oh my god, just fucking get into it already." But is your favorite of all time queer film on your list, or is it too popular to have been put on?
I did not put my favorite queer movie on this list because, and I guess I'll spoil what that is. My favorite is Moonlight. Um,
Okay,
that
and that's
movie
mine
is,
too.
yeah, it's a fantastic film,
It
forward and
is.
backwards. And when I was thinking of like which film, like it was, I wasn't sure if it was right on the bubble for me because I think a lot of people still haven't seen that movie, but I
Yeah,
do
I
think
know.
that it did win Best Picture, so I was like,
Yep.
it's probably right on the bubble. So that one was on my list, and then I cut it for something else. So yeah, that is not on my list, but
Me
yeah,
too. That's funny because it is. That movie emotionally wrecked me and healed me at the same time. It is not on my list, but it could have been because, um, yeah, like even it won the Oscar, but everybody talks about La La Land because of that mix-up still, right? And that'll go down in history. Is it more remembered for that, or is La La Land more remembered for that? I don't know. I don't know.
I think La La Land is, because
Yeah.
people don't talk about when Moonlight won the Oscar. They talk about when La La Land accidentally got that Oscar.
Hmm,
And that's pretty telling, that particular,
exactly.
remembering. Yeah.
So I will also say, I meant to say this. I have my Love is Love handcrafted mug that I
Hell
got from one
yeah.
of my brother's stores. And then I've got my queer representation pop vinyls behind me. If you are watching on YouTube or Twitch, I've got Dolly Parton, Deadpool, and Elton John. Those are the only three, the gayest pop vinyls I had.
That,
So
wonderful. I mean,
yeah,
they are, you've got our patron saint, you've got our pansexual,
yes,
wackadoodle Bugs Bunny character, and then you've got, one of our forefathers who, at least for us, came before us. So,
yes.
yeah, it's a good trio.
I'll never forget the day when my grandfather, he was, it was before me or my brother had come out, and he was saying some things, that grandfathers, used to say back in the day about Elton John. And I didn't know even at that time that like Elton John was gay. I just loved his music, and I wasn't. So then I remember listening to his music thinking like, oh my god, this music is amazing, and it's even better now that I know that it was from a gay man, singing this stuff in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And yeah, so I love Elton, and I went to go see his last concert there, and
Oh,
he
wow.
came to Toronto. I didn't have anyone to go with. I went all I it's Toronto's 2 hours from me. Went there by myself, and just stood like 8 rows from the back, and like I cried, and it was just incredible. So yeah,
Oh my goodness, what an
yeah,
amazing experience,
I'll
right?
never forget it. Yeah. So, and then the one other question is like we kind of always ask, but I think we've kind of covered it. Is how did you go about making this list? When you sat down, what do you think?
Yeah, so I first sat down and I just listed out what are some of my favorite LGBTQ movies, just in general. And then I started by eliminating a few that I felt were kind of like that would be hard for me to call underrated, So
Yeah, yeah,
Moonlight got cut, things like Call Me by Your Name or Brokeback Mountain
of
or
course.
even like Boys Don't Cry, things like that, like there was this little stretch of films from like, okay, these are probably the ones that people think of first. So
Yeah,
what's the next layer of that onion inside of that? And that's sort of where I ended up landing. I tried not to be too precious about like at one point I'm thinking like, well, I want to make sure I have a lesbian film, a gay film, a bisexual, and then I'm like, I'm gonna get this parsed down so tightly that it's not really going to be a real list anymore. It's just going to be checking boxes. So I pulled
or
back
one
away from
that's
that. Yeah,
yeah, or one that's not true enough to you, right? Like you're like now I'm just checking boxes, and this isn't the list I would have made if I didn't feel like I had to adhere to something. If you see me looking down at my phone, it's because I have all my notes and stuff on there.
yeah,
I am not ignoring you.
I get it. Yeah, I no,
Um,
how about you? What was your selection criteria like?
yeah, so I basically along the same way, I had some on there that like one that I really love that I think doesn't get enough conversation is and I have but I also haven't seen it since it came out. So it might be awful now, but I loved it. It was Trans America with Felicity Huffman,
Hmm.
and it got nominated for Oscars, so I left it off. And I also hadn't seen it in a while, and part of me thought like maybe this movie doesn't stand up anymore because I think it was like 2011 or something.
Yeah.
So left it off. And yeah, so there was a couple little ones like that where I'm like, oh, and I like you, I considered Moonlight, and I left it off because I'm like, it won Best Picture. You can't put that on there. So yeah, so that was pretty much it. Um, so I like to give pole position or whatever you want to do. Do you want to go first or do you want to go last?
I'm good. I can peel off the band-aid. Yeah.
Okay, okay, you go then.
The first film that I've got listed here is actually probably the lightest in terms of like subject matter. I think that with a lot of the queer films that we're going to talk about today, or at least on my side, there's going to be some heavy subject matter,
Yeah.
but not with this first one. This one is a rom com from 1999 called Trick.
Okay.
Um, so Trick stars Christian Campbell, who is Nev Campbell's, I believe, younger brother,
Oh,
and Jean Paul Pitoque. And basically, they're these two young gay men, one of which is has a roommate played by Tori Spelling. Um, and he's sort of like he's composing his first Broadway, like, or off Broadway musical. And finally, he just decides, I need to go out and get out of the house. I haven't really like gotten laid in a while, so I'm going to go out to a bar and just sort of have a good evening. And he meets a dancer there. He meets a like an exotic dancer there, you know, like one of those like go-go boy type things. And the two hit it off, and they decide they're going to try to go back to one of their places and just have a one night stand. The problem is they keep trying to find places here in Manhattan where they can just sort of go one house, another house, you know, another bar,
right.
wherever, and something always happens. So they spend this entire evening together just trying to have a one night stand, but end up developing something a little bit
Okay. I hadn't. And what year was that? You said?
more. 1999.
Oh, 99. Okay. I hadn't heard of that, and sounds like a kind of a buddy, almost like a buddy comedy. It's funny too, you're saying?
Oh, it's very funny, you know,
Okay,
because like,
okay.
yeah, the situations that they find themselves in are, you know, it's just sort of like one disaster after another. Um, it's playful, and it's accessible too, you know, like while it is about two gay men trying to have a hookup, I think that, you know, it doesn't delve so far into the subcultures that if you're listening to this and you're not you know, if you're not in the LGBT community, this is an accessible film. You know, you'll get it, you'll understand it, you'll appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good. That's exciting. I better pull up my list. I'm like doing all this stuff, writing down your list. I'm like, I feel like Brian here. I'm like looking down at my phone and on my list, or Anderson's phone's going off because he's a realtor now. So my number five, and I think this. Oh my gosh, maybe I don't know if some of these are too common or not. But anyways, it's fine. My number five is The Miseducation of Cameron Post. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it
I have, yeah.
is Chloe Grace Moretz. She essentially is taken to uh, one of those centers for where they try to change you.
Like a
And it's
conversion camp.
thank
Yeah.
you, yes, and it's a coming of age like drama, and it's her, John Gallagher Jr., Sasha Lane. It came out in 2018, uh, and I oh Jennifer Eels also in this, and she's playing kind of like the the rude bitch, which she doesn't always do, and I love her so much. So and it's set in 1993, so it's a bit of a period piece, and she gets the crux of the story is she gets caught having sex with a woman in her car, or her girlfriend's car, and she gets sent to the conversion camp. And we have seen the conversion camp story, um Boy Erased, which I didn't really love.
Yeah.
I think it was good, and that's with Lucas. Oh, he was in the
Lucas Hedges.
Lucas Hedges,
Yeah.
thank you. And him and Nicole Kidman's in that, and Russell Crowe, and that it's good, and it's a similar story. This one I just felt more of a connection with the characters. The characters felt more real, in my eyes, and it wasn't as like as dark and dour as Boy Erased kind of was. So, and Sasha Lane, she's great. Gallagher Jr. is great. So check that out. The Miseducation of Cameron Post, and I think it's one of Grace Moretz's best roles, like since Kick Ass. So
Agreed. And Sasha Lane, she's slowly entering that territory of, and she doesn't have a ton of credits under her name, you know, but she's got some.
Yeah.
And she's slowly entering that tier for me of like when Sasha Lane shows up in something, it adds like at least like 1 point of like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go see this to me. I really enjoy what she does. Yeah, that was a weird year. 2018 was Cameron Miseducation of Cameron Post and Boy Erased. So
Yeah.
it was the year of the conversion camp.
Yeah. And it wasn't. I don't know if it was 2018. It might have been the following year, but it was the year that that movie came out with uh, Steve Carroll and Timothy Chalamet, and it just felt so similar to Boy Erased, but it was about drugs and going to a rehab center, and the other one was and I found them both so dire that when I saw the Miseducation of Cameron Post, I was like, "Hey, this is kind of what I was looking for in both of those movies," like, and that I didn't get. So, yeah,
That Timothy Chalamet movie, interesting story on that. We do some press screenings here in Austin where I'm at. And they're not like, if you haven't been to one, anyone that's listening, they're not like these big, like, ritzy affairs, at least like the ones that I go to. It's like 10 people in a little like theater, like where the rest of the seats open, and they just play the movie and then have you fill out a comment card afterwards, usually like 4 or 5 days before it comes out. So it's nothing too major, right? Um, so I'm sitting there in this tiny theater. There's just a handful of other people, and again, they never really do this for things. But before that Timothy Chalamet one, they say, "Oh, well, you got a special guest for this one," and in shuffles Timothy Chalamet in this like just complete gray hoodie, just like, "Yeah, thanks so much for coming out and seeing this one," and then he just sort of shuffles back out, and it was just like, "Oh, that was so weird." Like, they didn't make it like a moment. They didn't experience. They just like he just came out and said like 2 minutes of words beforehand, and
he
then
didn't
was
answer
gone.
questions.
No, there was no Q&A or anything like that. It was just sort of like just sort of like, thanks for coming out. It's so nice to have you all here.
No,
His sort of like, kind of that awkward, like, like, yeah, I'm so glad to be here, hot thing, that he does. And then he
yeah,
was gone.
yeah,
It was just
yeah.
like, where did that come from? So, yeah.
He was probably just like, "Okay, we need you for 2 minutes," and he drove by, dropped him off, and but yeah, I thought Forrest had it right here in the comments with My Boy, but it was Beautiful Boy, so which triggered it in my memory. So thank you, Forrest. Beautiful Boy, and that's not a gay movie. It's a drug addiction movie that came out in 2018 as well, and I had seen Beautiful Boy and Boy Erased, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this one with Cameron because I think Chloe Grace Moretz is beautiful, and that's even if it's dour like the other two, I'll be fine. And I ended up loving it. So
Good.
I feel like we talked too long about that one. I'm sorry, but
No.
yeah. So you're number four. Uh,
Uh, my number four, we're gonna stay in the 90s and look at a film from 1997 called Happy Together.
Happy
Um,
Together.
so Happy Together is a film by Wong Kar Wai, who,
Hmm.
if you're kind of in the, if you look at a lot of like best of lists in terms of like overall films, you'll see like In the Mood for Love listed amongst a lot of critics as a favorite movie, and that's probably Wong Kar Wai's opus, that or Chungking Express. But Happy Together is the story about these two men who are in a not a great relationship. It's very one-sided in terms of like the power dynamic. One is sort of like holding on to this relationship that he wants to have had. The other one is sort of in and out, flitting about, doing his own thing. The two go down to Argentina, and while they're there, it starts as a trip, and then it extends longer. And the two find themselves just drifting further and further apart. What I love about this one is that it was one of the first films that I ever saw that paints queer people in a complex light. And what I mean by that is we had a long stretch of films that were all about, of course, like demonizing gays, like,
Hmm.
making them these tropey caricatures, or making them sort of like, or we had to die of AIDS, or whatever it had to be for
Yeah. Right. Right.
little stretches. Um, and then there was a course correction where all of our depictions had to be glowingly positive because we needed to have that positive representative. This is right down the middle. We've got two characters on different ends of sort of like the moral spectrum who are in this push-pull relationship with them. It feels like a very normal um, way of looking at a this type of relationship in film, but through the queer experience. Wong Kar-wai,
Mhm.
of course, is a master director with such a beautiful control over color palette as well as over he uses these pop culture songs, and of course Happy Together is the name of the movie, and it uses the song by the Turtles, Happy Together, throughout the film.
Okay.
um, yeah, great performances, great story, and for something that feels like it's got a lot of weight and a lot of depth, it's also a 96-minute movie, so it
Oh, perfect.
it
Yeah.
it gets in and gets out, but at the same time, you don't feel like it's too brisk to do what it needs
Right.
to do.
Oh, I love a 90-minute movie, 91 91-minute movie. Yeah, no, I don't haven't heard of it, but I'm really excited to see. I knew your list would probably be 5 movies that I need to see. Um, so an Argent like 1997 Argentina. This was made in China, or or was it made in? I'm only thinking.
So I believe it was. So I don't know how much of it was shot in Argentina, but
Hmm.
of course, yeah. Okay, I just double checked it on IMDb, and there is a Argentina unit and a China unit. So
Okay.
like, yeah. So it looks like they shot a lot of it on location there.
Yeah, I just I wonder, because China hasn't always been the most sensitive to LGBT stuff. So good for this movie for you know have made doing what it wanted to do. I mean, it's the artists that really push the narrative forward sometimes, right? And it is Happy Together in 2022 was ranked the 225th greatest film of all time in the Sight and Sound Critics poll. So that's good to
I
know.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
it's a hell of a placement on the list. Yeah, and if
yeah,
anyone's sort of looking to get into, foreign language cinema, queer cinema, sort of like indie cinema, any of those different things, this checks a lot of those boxes, and
yeah.
is, at the end of the day, is just a damn good movie. So I would really recommend, of the different ones on my list, I think Happy Together is the one that I'm sort of most excited to have on here, even though it's, I guess, number 4 on my list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's I get that. It's like
Yeah.
you're happy to have it on the list, but it couldn't be your number one. I
Yeah.
have that too. Um, well, you have Wong Kar Wai. I have Pedro Almodovar. I think we had to at one point had to have him on here, and I recently in life have fallen in love with this director, and I'm trying to go back and watch more of his stuff. So I fell in love with him by watching the 2019 movie Pain and Glory with Antonio Banderas, and then it's a pretty like Spanish cast. Uh, Penelope Cruz is in it as well, but I would probably butcher a lot of the other names that are in this movie. And Antonio Banderas plays gay um, a gay man, or a I think he's maybe bisexual. I related with the character a lot. He's a film director. He's mentally declining and physically declining, and it's really making him look back on his life and his films. And he's invited to come see one of his films, like a 32-year reunion, and he would be reuniting with a cast of members that he hadn't seen in that long, and there is some personal problems like there that he and this looks back on his young life, growing up, as a young man, and trying to be gay, and stuff like that. So it is it's very interesting, and I think like Penelope Cruz plays his mother in the younger scenes. I just found it to be a very beautiful movie. Again, this is one that is not too dour. I mean, I find with LGBT movies, we always kind of get a little bit of that, like, when it goes back in time, you know, there's always that hate or something from someone. Um, but Pain and Glory, it is mostly in Spanish, and so I know that's a barrier to entry for some people. But if it's not, give this one a look. I really enjoyed it. So
Yeah, it's a damn good pick. The
yeah,
year this came out, it was in my top 10 for that year.
okay, good.
Very good movie. Almodovar, I think one of his special skills, in addition to just being a damn good director, a damn good storyteller, being able to pull those things together, um, when he works specifically with Penelope Cruz, I think that you have these directors who sometimes have their like not necessarily their muse, but like that character, that actress that they keep coming back to.
Yeah.
Um, he also directed her in All About My Mother,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
was for another late '90s movie, and that one includes some LGBTQ themes as well. And Penelope Cruz is so good in that, and she's
Okay.
so good in Pain and Glory. So I just really feel like you know Almodovar and Cruz, they just like get each other on some sort of like deep level that brings both of their talents even more to the forefront when they collaborate.
Hmm. Hmm. No, that's and how as soon as he said my muse, and I always think of, like, it's usually a male director and a female star. And but immediately when you said muse, I thought of Eggers and
Yeah.
Defoe. and and then I thought of, oh wait, you can also, oh no, Kinds of Kindness director
Oh,
is,
Yorgos
yes,
Lanthimos.
you can also say Lanthimos and Defoe.
Yeah.
He's like lately, and so Defoe seems to be people's muse lately. But yes, Penelope Cruz is. I don't know. I guess I just hadn't seen her in enough, and like the last few years, whenever I see her, I'm like, God, she's amazing. But
That's exactly right. Like the Almodovar reminded me that like she's not just. I think I unfairly dismissed her because I think there was probably a little slew of movies that I saw her in that were just not the best
mhm.
showcase of her talents, which is fine. A lot of
Yeah,
people get into Hollywood and then just do movies. They
those
just
were her money making years, kind of, right? Like,
yeah.
here, let me do a James Bond or something like that, or a stupid comedy, romantic comedy that'll give me 20 million in the bank or something. But yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, I was gonna post that. I think that's our own Eric, right? That's our own Eric Homies. But if I just gave it away, if people are watching on YouTube or whatever, he
That's
is
right.
saying, "What the hell? My two favorite people on one podcast." Thank you, Eric. We love you.
Love you so much, Eric. Yeah, he'll tune in sometimes to our live streams as well and give some live feedback. Like,
Yeah,
oh, I like this, or oh, that movie sucked. But we'll get to see it kind of live, and it's always fun when he's hanging out with
yeah,
us live.
exactly. I get Bruce in here sometimes as well, so he'll jump on if he sees it and give a little feedback and then leave. We're all so busy, all of us movie people, right? We're jumping in between work and movies.
Yeah.
What are our friends up to? So you're number 3.
My number three is I'm gonna split up these two. So my number three is a movie from. I'm jumping back in time a little bit
Good.
to the '70s, 1972. This is a film written and directed by Rainier Werner Fassbinder, and it's The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant. Now, there was a remake of this that recently came out.
Oh,
I want to say last year, one of those like English language modern cast remakes, I believe. Um, I haven't seen it, so I don't know how that is. If that comes up, if anyone's like, "Oh, how was that?" No clue. Just haven't gotten to it yet. So this one is it's sort of a chamber piece in that the entire movie is sort of based in this one um, sort of like loft apartment, studio apartment loft type thing, where you have this woman who's sort of like an upscale fashion designer, who has this relationship or series of relationships with younger women. The first of which is let me pull, you mentioned notes. I've got mine here on my phone as well. Um, so Petra von Kant in this is, and she's played by Margit Cartensen, or Margit Cartensen. So
Hmm.
she's this caustic, arrogant, just like she is a very pompous woman who is in this relationship with a sort of a secretary maid. Like she also works and does some designs for her, named Marlene. And you can tell that it's sort of like a somewhat power dynamic S&M type relationship. Um, but it's not equitable, and it's not like one of those like those good power dynamic S&M relationships. Instead, it's one that borders on sort of like emotionally abusive.
Okay.
So in comes this 23-year-old woman named Karen, who's like this beautiful woman who wants to be a model. And Petra is just like falls in love with her, invites her to move in, and then has to deal with kind of like that whole emotional maelstrom that she's created between the woman that's still kind of working for her and is still kind of pining for her, but who's being emotionally manipulated, and this young model who is it's even that's a little bit of a one-sided relationship in a lot of ways. This
Yeah.
is only done over the use of like I want to say like 5 or 6 scenes. So a scene is
Wow.
in this movie is like 15-20 minutes long.
Like a
And
long
then it
cut, or is
not
it?
one cut
Okay.
scenes,
Okay.
but just like you stay in the one scene for a long time.
Okay.
And it's always in this apartment. So you never get outside and do other things. I always said that this would also make a gorgeous stage play because of
Yeah.
that. But yeah, it's just a damn good story about messy queer people being messy, and just sort of the emotional baggage that comes with that. This was one that when we're talking about sort of the ripple effect on this one, I believe that and I think this won't be the only one that I say on this list. This is one I know I talked about with Bruce Perky, and he ended up having, I believe, a pretty positive experience with when he sat down and gave this one a go. Yeah, it's The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant from the 70s. You should be able to find it. I think it's in Criterion Collection. So if you have
Okay.
Criterion Channel, you can see it there. If not, it's one of those ones. It's like randomly streaming on different places from time to time. Looks like it's on Max right now, according to IMDb. So hey, if you got
Okay.
HBO Max, you can go watch it right now.
So, it actually was a play originally, by the director Rainier Werner Fassbinder, um, but it looks like it was all in German, like the play was, like a completely German play,
Yeah,
probably only over in Germany, and yeah, so we probably never got it over here, but
yeah.
looks like he this is like the same year the play debuted, he wrote the movie and got it done almost. So
That
it,
makes perfect sense. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think the play got as much, love as the movie did. And then you were obviously obviously right, but in 2022 there was a remake just called Peter von Kant, and that is starring nobody I really know. It looks like an entirely French cast. Did uh, was that so? Yeah, very interesting. I'm interested in seeing that one for sure. Um, yeah. So I want to just take this quick moment because maybe when I was younger and I was an impressionable young teen, and whenever I could, see some gay content on TV when I was alone, I would watch it. I can't remember. It was like either HBO, but we also had one in Canada that was kind of like would have play those movies every once in a while. And there was this movie I watched, and if anybody can tell me the name of it, I need you to know. I need you to tell me. And I think it's got to be 90s, late 80s. Um, but it's this woman, and she has sex with a gentleman like his who's gay. The movie is about him. pretty sure. I just remember them in this house, and he's gay, but they end up having sex, and then she gets pregnant. And it was a pretty rated R movie. So I don't know if anybody could think, if anybody who listens, like, you can email us at email me at filmvaulters@gmail.com or on Instagram or whatever. But I've tried to look for it in the past, and there's so many movies like that. But I don't. Anyways, I wanted to put that out there because it kind of popped into my head. And I've always tried to find that since. So yeah. So my number three. Uh, I don't know if I exactly love my list. Maybe I think maybe it was too common, but that's okay.
No,
It
so far so
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
I feel like there was only like the Film Vault and Anderson and myself and a few others were the ones that were championing this movie. It's Uncle Frank, that came out in 2020, and of course the 2020 films didn't get as much love as they should have. But this has Paul Bettany, Sophia Lillis, Judy Greer, Steve Zahn, Margot Martindale, and Stephen Root, who plays an asshole in this movie, which I didn't, I've seen him do it before, but he's pretty good in this one. And it's about this guy. It's about this guy and Frank, played by Paul Bettany. It's in the 70s, and his 18-year-old niece just loves him, and then eventually gets to go hang out with him for a weekend. And Uncle Frank is very nervous because he is a gay man, and he doesn't know what she will think of him. Their whole family doesn't know, so uh, she gets to know him and his boyfriend, and they've been together for a long time, and this niece has never met him, and it's just a really beautiful story, about this 18-year-old, and the way she sees a gay relationship through her eyes was kind of like me seeing it for the first time, like understanding that I could be gay, or some people are gay, and really like, okay, these are it's not bad to be gay. It's who you are. And the way she's learning it, it's just, I found very precious, and I really was in tune with, because it kind of felt like me almost. So it's a really beautiful film. It has some really heartbreaking moments, especially one near the end, but also some lovely moments near the end as well. So uh, please, I think this was a Prime release, so I'm pretty sure it's still on Prime Video. It was funded by Prime, Amazon Prime. So check this one out. Paul Bettany's great, and yeah, I it's again another maybe too common, but I recommended it to people who never heard of it, and they come back and they're like, "Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you for." It's one that I could recommend to anybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, uh,
Paul
yeah,
Bettany is very good in this, and I think it really speaks to like I think there's a lot of us in the gay community who the relationships that we have with our families isn't always
yeah,
through, and there are obviously exceptions to this. There's plenty of gay couples that have children either through surrogacy, previous relationships, or adoption, or what have you. But a lot of us, our relationship is through our nephews and nieces, and we develop
mm,
these things that are these
mhm,
relationships that are somewhere between, like, not parental, because we're not
mhm.
the parents in these situations, and they kind of lean more into these like friendships, and we get to be sort of like, or mentors, or sort of like pathfinders, or what have you, for
Yeah,
this younger generation. And that comes with baggage too, because this movie is set in the 70s, when that is a very different thing to do than it is to do here in 2025.
yeah,
Yeah, this is a good pick. I really liked this one.
yeah. And I should have said it's from director Alan Ball, who did one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Actually, my favorite, 6 Feet Under.
Mhm.
Um, and he did True Blood and some other things, and he won an Oscar. So I think you're in really good hands with this one. So yeah. So your number, sorry, and just to respond to what you said there, I completely agree. In the 70s, people there's certain people who would say, oh, um, you're gay, well, I don't want you anywhere near my niece or nephew, right? Or and like unfortunately, that's the way it was sometimes, or you're, you know, and now it's great because sometimes that younger generation, they see us and they're like, oh cool, like there's someone who is like, I can talk to about this stuff, and we're the you're the cool uncle or whatever. So
Yeah.
um so this movie kind of puts that on display. So yeah. So you're at number two, buddy. What do you
Yeah, number
what do
two,
you
I'm gonna
got?
go a little bit more recent, and I think this is one that probably at least a few film volters have seen, but I don't know if everyone has. So that's why it made my list, and it's 2015's Tangerine.
Ah,
Uh,
good.
yeah. So Tangerine is, while it's not Sean Baker's first film, it's his first film that I saw, and
Most of
it's
us did, yeah.
yeah, it's the one that sort of put him on the map. This is Sean
Hmm.
Baker, who in more recent years did the Florida Project, Red Rocket, and then Anora from this year, which is very likely going to put him in at least Oscar conversations.
Yeah.
But Tangerine, this was this movie where it's all sort of set in this one little spot of Los Angeles. And when I say a little spot of it, it's just like a few block radius. Everything is sort of hyper focused just on Christmas Eve. So, yes, this is a Christmas movie. You can watch it at Christmas. And it's these two trans sex workers who one of them realizes that the pimp that was she was in a relationship with, but also then ended up cheating on her before going to jail. Well, he's out of jail now, and she decides she's going to go track him down and give him a piece of her mind. And so all of this is happening over the course of this one evening. It's a comedy. It's very funny. It's also very sincere. It's also sort of like, I think, the first film that that you can sort of see the through line of what Sean Baker would do in some of his later films,
Mm.
where he really takes these stories about people on the fringe of society and really just follows them through these experiences. And he did all of this while shooting the entire film on an iPhone. Now, granted, an iPhone with like a nice lens snapped onto it, but it
Of
was all
course.
shot on an iPhone in 2015.
And I think that
Um,
was the hook that got a lot of us into it at first, and its subject matter. But I remember that being kind of the, oh wow. But
No,
yeah.
you're absolutely right. Like, before I knew that this was a movie about trans subjects or anything like that, this was the iPhone movie,
Yeah.
and that's what got me to sit down and watch it.
Yeah.
The one of the nice things about this is he does such a good job. Sean Baker, I think, does a great job of really pulling amazing performances out of his leads. And the two lead actresses here, Katana Kiki Rodriguez and Maya Taylor, who, I'll be honest, I don't know if I've seen them in much else, if anything at all, because I don't know that they were just, I think they were sort of like scratching the surface of their careers as well here.
Hmm.
But they give lead performances that, I think shatter kind of what you would expect from sort of like new actresses in sort of like a lead role in a major film. Um, yeah, Tangerine is the goods. If you're a Sean Baker fan, um, and you should be, uh,
Yes.
Tangerine is great. Should go on your list.
I think most of us are heavily Sean Baker fans. I've loved everything he's done since Tangerines. And Anora just blew me out of the water. It's
Yeah.
really it's really battling with Dune 2 to be my number one of the year, I think. And it's funny. Anderson always brings this up, so I'm gonna bring it up. The same year that Tangerines came out, there was another movie. A Tangerine came out. There was another movie called Tangerines, which was nominated for a foreign language film, and I watched both. Um, and that is a good movie about a war in oh my gosh, Abkhazia in '92 and '93, and it's about this man who grows tangerines. And I'll never forget that. So
That was that was a very confusing year for me because for that very reason, I saw that Tangerines was nominated for foreign language Oscar. I'd seen Tangerine, I had not yet seen Tangerines, and I'm like, did they get this one really wrong? And no, Tangerines is a great movie too. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
worthy of the nomination, but
it was.
yeah, it's super weird that it was the same year. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't know how many other movies have the word tangerine in it, but that was just kind of a funny coincidence. So, um, yeah, so I guess I'm on my number two. Oh my gosh, and I forgot that. And I pulled up my information on my number one. So I need to pull up the information on my number two because it has been a while since I've seen it. It is another coming of age drama, 2017 film called Beach Rats. Um, I don't know if you saw this one, but I remember it getting a little bit of traction. I think Anderson saw it or something, and maybe that's how I
Feels right.
and it got some independent spirit awards, and it was the first time I'd ever seen Harris Dickinson, who is a bigger actor today. We see him in some stuff, but you might not know him by name. He was in The Iron Claw, one of the brothers. He was in Baby Girl this year, where the
Mhm.
Crawdads sing. So he went on to bigger things, and it was one of the first times I'd seen him. This is in 2017 film, if I didn't say that. And he plays a 19-year-old boy in Brooklyn who spends his days getting high with his macho friends. And at night, Frankie cruises Brooklyn Boys, a webcam site for gay men, but partially obscures his face with a hat. So it's essentially a man who, in his real life, he is something else, and in his other life, in his not so other life, he is someone else. And um, and he's trying to figure out who he is. Am I gay? What am I? Do I like this or do I not like this? And this one has just stuck with me since 2017. It definitely deserves a rewatch. Um, it definitely hit a lot of spots with me because I didn't come out until I was 27. Um, and I like to hang out with my dad and all of his friends who are very macho. I tried to be careful what I talked about, what I said, because I didn't want to you know out myself, or well, I was even kind of lying to myself back then. But whatever. So this is a really interesting movie, and it kind of shows some of the pitfalls that a man who is trying to figure out who they are falls into, or what can happen. And I really loved it. And Harris Dickinson is maybe one of my all passes because I kind of fell in love with him in this movie. I was like, he is very, very handsome. So I think if you I think this definitely is one that I maybe, if you are gay, this is going to hit you a little differently, or and you had those struggles. But I don't know. It's also a really good movie. It's a really well directed movie, and it's directed by a woman. So that's always great. And she has not done. She did Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. Um, in 2020, and she hasn't done really anything since. So yeah, so Beach Rats. That is the next one.
I need to give this one a watch. This one fell through my cracks that year, and I remember it was one that I kept circling around and just never got out to go see because it was one of Neon, which I live in
Yeah.
Austin, where Alamo Drafthouse is from, and we had Drafthouse Films, which eventually morphed into Neon. And so
Okay.
this was one of those first films, or early films by under the Neon label. So I was interested immediately. Plus the subject matter. You're
Mhm.
right about Harris Dickinson. He is. I just saw him in Baby Girl, and that is one of the most smoldering performances of the year.
Is he the lover? Like, is he the Nicole Kidman's lover in that? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
he
Okay.
is.
I got you.
Um,
Good.
and yeah, and he is. It's a very sexy role, and he does a good job of playing sexy.
He does. So okay, good, because he is definitely younger in this because it's you know, 8 years old or whatever, but he is still very handsome. And this was I didn't realize that I said it's the first movie I've seen him in. This was his first film ever. So
Wow.
um, definitely, I think it fell through the cracks for a lot of people. I think I just picked it up because I like to see what gets nominated at the Independent Spirit Awards, and I, you know, pick up some that I might have missed because those are the up and coming, you know, directors or actors or writers. So yeah, um, I'm asking Forrest what Teen Beach is. Teen Beach. I've never heard of that movie. So your number one.
Yeah. So my number one is one that I felt with when I think about like the kind of the Venn diagram of like film vault, film volter, cinematics, like communities. I think the film that I've talked about the most that falls under the LGBTQ parameters here, um, and try to turn as many people onto as possible is the film that had to make my number one list. It's a film from 2014, a film by Peter Strickland, who is another one of those directors who you should check out his stuff, including Barbarian Sound Studio and In Fabric. But the one that I want to flag here is The Duke of Burgundy. Uh, the Duke of Burgundy. This is a
That's the
movie.
only one of his films I haven't seen. I'll just say that right now. I've seen the other two.
Well,
Okay.
this is a really good one. It's and I have to be careful. It's one that it unfolds kind of like what its true subject matter is, and I'm going to try not to like spoil it, but
Okay.
you end up with two women who are in. This is another power dynamic movie. One who is sort of like the dominatrix toward the other, and they sort of keep testing the extent of kind of like what that means. And as you explore the movie more, you find out more about kind of what their relationship is like outside of those scenes,
Mm-hmm.
kind of where the true power dynamic really lies.
Mm-hmm.
There are some, it's not afraid to have fun with the fact that they're dealing with some of these like weird kink fetish things, and so it has fun. There's
Good.
some funny as hell lines here. Um, the subject matter of this one, it's listed as a dark romance, drama romance. When I look at the categories on IMDb, I think all of that is true, but I do think there is it's not a movie that feels heavy or is not allowed to have a little bit of fun here and there.
Yeah.
The lead performances, Sid Babbitt Knudsen and Kiara Deanna are fantastic in this. Just the whole cast is, honestly. But Peter Strickland is another one of those directors who I feel like, more people should watch. His stuff is just always captivating and always interesting, always weird. But
Mm-hmm.
this is the one that I think just most fully distills like its stories and its characters into something that you can just sort of like sink your teeth into and just sort of explore for that hour and 45 minutes you're watching this movie. Just really live in their world and feel what it's like to be these characters.
Well, I am 1 out of 5 on your list, so I have some watching to do, but I am very excited because LGBT films clearly resonate with me, and the fact that I haven't watched more is stupid. Um,
It's more opportunities though, like
it
that's the
is.
thing. And
It's
let's
exciting.
let's let's be honest though, like a lot of films are just, it's harder to find some of these films than it is to find films that are either more readily accessible on like the major streaming platforms, on Netflix or Hulu or what have you, or is available in your Cineplex. I know I'm blessed in this regard in that I live in a film town,
Yeah.
so I have art house theaters that I can go down the street and catch some of these things. But there are many places in the country and the world where you don't have that within an hour, 2 hour, 3 hours drive.
Yeah.
So um, the
Like I
important
haven't
thing is, Yeah,
Sorry.
find what you can. Yeah, no, you're good. The important thing is like find what you can, where you can, when you can.
Yep.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
always more opportunities.
Like I have to drive. It's coming to my close theater for some reason the week after. But if I had wanted to go see Nosferatu, I would have had to drive 45 minutes. My closest art house theater is like an hour, which we'll get some of the foreign films, but that's about it. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes there's a big chain one that's like an hour and 15 minutes away from me. And we're in Canada, it's cold. I don't
Yeah.
sometimes I don't want to drive that. Sorry, did you say you're in LA or where?
No, I'm in Austin, Texas.
Texas. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So Austin is can be a hub. Yeah. So I had family down there. They just moved though. So
Yeah.
yeah. So my number one, then I guess we're on my number one. That's crazy. It's actually a documentary, animated documentary called Flea. And it was at the Sundance Film Festival, and it did get it was the Danish entry for the Academy Awards, and it was selected as one of the 5 finalists. So it was nominated for Best Documentary Feature and Best Animated Feature. But I think there was a huge barrier to entry with this movie, being in another language and a documentary and animated, and a lot of people did not see it. And I think everyone should see this movie. It is directed by Jonas Poher Rasmussen, and it is about a man named Amin Nawabi, and he is being interviewed in Denmark by the director, who has known Amin since they were teenagers. And the director is making a documentary about his life and his escape from Afghanistan. Oh my gosh, Afghanistan to Denmark as a refugee. Amin had not shared the full details of his story with anyone, including even his boyfriend Casper, who he plans to marry. And there's a lot in there. The movie is a story about a refugee trying to live a better life, and it is harrowing and sad because he has a bunch of sisters and his mother, and they can only go over one at a time, and it is so tense. And it's animated, and you're listening to this guy talk, and it's so tense listening, and you fall in love with this guy. I fell in love with him. By the end of this movie, I'm like, I love this guy. This is breaking my heart, and at the same time, he's figuring out who he is. Like he's going over in this boat, and he's having gay experiences as a refugee on a boat. Like wild things that you just wouldn't ever deal with in our entire wildest dreams. Over here, like it's he's trying, and he's been told it's wrong his whole life, like you would be killed if you're gay in Afghanistan. It is just a tearjerker, and a lovely movie. So please, yeah, please watch this one out. I think it has value added to every single person listening to this podcast right now, and it is Flee, FLEE, like fleeing the country. So yeah, so that's my number one.
That was an
Have you seen
amazing
this?
pick too. Flea is so damn good.
So good.
It's
And I think it just gets forgotten, kind of.
I think it does. I think it's when I was looking through my list and even some of my also rans, I realized that like you know I leaned, all 5 of my picks were like narrative. I didn't get any documentaries that made the list, and I remember that as sort of like being like one of my weak spots there. Like, yeah, I should probably look more at the docs. But this one is good because it has that narrative flow to it. Like it's and the animation on it is beautiful. Like you said, the characters. Yeah, this is a great one. That's a great pick. It's like
Thank you.
This is one I was like, man, I wish I'd put that on my list. That's a good pick.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't have any crossover.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear your also rans if you haven't had any, and then I'm gonna Well, I'll also say here, Eric says I would add Bertrand Mandico movies, Wild Boys, After Blue, and She Is Conan. They don't center on LGBTQ in story specifically, but the world and characters certainly fit within those parameters. And I and uh, and then Forrest said neither of us had. I saw the TV Glow on our list, and I think that's because that movie just came out this last year, and I think it got way more buzz, and it is in the zeitgeist right now. A lot of people are talking about it. It's gotten some TikTok love in the last little bit, and we were kind of going for less common queer movies, but I think in a few years it probably could have been on one of our lists, maybe as an
Mhm.
uncommon one, because it's very indie. It is very small, but it's in the zeitgeist right now, so I don't think I thought of it.
Yeah, that was the exact same for me. This is, I mean, it's my favorite film. When you said Anora was it and Dune 2 were fighting it out for your number one, for me this year, Anora and I Saw the TV Glow were fighting it out for
Okay.
my number one.
Okay.
Dune 2 is like in my 3 or 4 slots, so we have some good overlap there.
Good.
Um, so yeah, I saw the TV Glow is great and should definitely like would make these lists. Same with Eric mentioned the Bertrand Mendico films. I haven't seen After Blue, but Wild Boys is like 5 women basically playing these like parts as if they were kind of like these transgressive like males, and it's a hell of a subversive film. And She Is Conan, I think, is the one that's more put has more put Bertrand Mendico on the map. And yeah, there's a lot of like queer relationships in that. In fact, it
Good.
really centers at its core on this set of like lesbian relationships, sort of played by 2 characters performed by multiple actresses. It's a weird movie over the
Okay.
course of the film, but it's
That
it's
always
it's
confuses me.
yeah, it is like there are 5 people play the lead in this in 5 different
Okay.
scenes. So yeah,
Oh my gosh.
it's that type of film.
Okay.
You mentioned also Rands and
Yes.
some of the ones on my list. So I almost put on a couple of documentaries, specifically Paris is Burning, which sort of a classic film about uh, the ball culture, which you see a lot of, like, when I say ball, not like fancy balls, but that's sort of like like
Like balls.
yeah, like balls, like drag, like so like where a lot
Oh,
of like drag and
okay.
stuff like that. Like if you watch like any of the things like drag race or anything like that, and you see some of the things that they do with their lip syncs and the way they do the catwalks, a lot of that originated from these the ball culture of like some of the bigger cities, kind of well, throughout previous decades. But you see a lot of that has been incorporated into kind of modern drag shows. So it's a great documentary. And then a more recent one is Kiki, which came out just a few years ago and is sort of about what that ball culture looks like in, I think the movie came out in like 2016. So it's sort of
Okay.
like 30 years after Paris is Burning. So those are both fantastic. I also almost put on The Watermelon Woman, which
Oh.
is a movie by Cheryl Dunye about this. So this she's a black lesbian filmmaker making a film about a black lesbian filmmaker who is probing into this like actress from the 30s, who played a lot of those like classic, like air quotes, like mammy type archetypes.
Okay.
And so it's her sort of like exploring her roots as a black woman in film, but also while navigating some lesbian relationships in her life. And the other one that almost made the list, and I just wasn't really sure whether or not I would kind of where Andrew Haig falls in all of these, was Weekend. Um, so fantastic movie about sort of a long weekend where these 2 men, have this one night stand that turns into a full weekend relationship. It's a great film, but I know Andrew Haig has sort of been bubbling up in terms of popularity as a filmmaker lately. So I pulled it off the list at the last minute because I was like, it I think it still counts as underrated, but it might be kind of the most well known of the ones that I've picked.
I have no fucking clue who Andrew Hag is, and
Oh,
and so you you really got me. I must be the wrong co-host for you here.
no, 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 no. Like that's, I mean, but if we
How do
were
you?
just talking about the exact same five movies with the exact
Yeah,
same five opinions, this
yeah,
would not be anything, right?
yeah.
It's more fun that like we kind of come in. Yeah, he did All of Us Strangers this last year, Lean on Pete,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
45 years. Um he did there was a series on HBO that he did called Looking, which was sort of like
Yep. I remember
yeah.
that.
So that's sort of his, but I think Weekend is sort of the one that he sort of first sort of grew to popularity with. It's from 2011, so
Okay.
it's a few years old now, but it's really good.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I'll
yeah.
look into that. I do. I've seen All of Us Strangers, but I think that is the only thing I've seen. And when I tried to look him up, I butchered his last name, so
I'm sure
nothing
I
came
butchered
up.
it too. Yeah.
Some wrestler came up. His last name is spelled Haigh. So I did not know that. Yeah. So I guess I had a top 10. So my number 10 would have been Can You Ever Forgive Me, which I just loved those two gay characters, which it was Melissa McCarthy and oh, I love him so much. He was in the dad in Saltburn and
Is in with
Richard E.
now
Grant.
Richard Grant. Yeah.
Yeah, and then a movie since a movie that really touched me since like my younger teen years is The Kids Are All Right, but I think that does get a lot of play, so I left it off. And if you are looking for a comedy that came out the same year as Bottoms, if you didn't like Bottoms, try Fire Island. That is with Bowen Yang, and I think it was still pretty funny. I like Bottoms, um, and it's one of those ones that got a lot of play, and a lot of religious groups picketed it and all that stuff because it became popular. But Fire Island is a good one.
Mhm.
I think it's on Hulu. And another one that I liked is called The Half of It, which it's kind of a love triangle between a bisexual girl and a man and a woman, uh, and it works. It works. It's pretty beautiful. Um, and then my number 6 was The Fallout, which I really wanted to put on. The Fallout is directed by the same person who did My Old Ass this year, that came out this year with Aubrey Plaza. And this has Jenna Ortega and Maddie Ziegler, who they go through a very traumatic event together. They kind of hate each other at the beginning, but then they fall into a romance type situation. And I don't really want to give everything away because this movie kind of unfolds in a beautiful way, and I really really enjoyed it. So that is The Fallout, and it is streaming on Crave and Prime. I think it looks like so. Give that a shot.
I've
Actually,
not seen the half of it. I need to put that on my list.
and I think it came across as more of like a Netflix romance, and nobody, but it got 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, and
Wow.
I thought it was a sweet little coming of age story that was beautiful. So yeah, it's and
So that's going to, I've got a flight coming up pretty soon, and I tend to like download like a Netflix movie for any of my travels and stuff like
yeah.
that. So I think the half of it, I'll probably be watching it,
Oh,
50,000 feet in the air, like within the next couple of weeks.
cool. Well, if you do, please let me know what you thought about it. I'll see if there's any last minute submissions, but I have our also rans here, which I posted a little late, so I apologize, everyone. But if you want to submit your also rans to our show, you can go to the our Instagram at the Film Vaulters and Facebook page at the Film Vaulters, or you can join the Facebook fan page for the Film Vault, which we do a lot of discussion in there. I always post in there. So our top 5 in no order. Well, Portrait of a Lady on Fire was definitely our number one. But then it was Hedwig and the Angry Inch, Boys Don't Cry, Blue is the Warmest Color, and Moonlight. And I'd like to state that I did not say that we were going with more uncommon ones. I just asked for LGBTQ films. We also got mentions of Duke of Burgundy, like that was on yours, Ed Wood, Bottoms, My Own Private Idaho, Paris
Mhm.
is Burning, um, Birdcage, Rocky Horror, and Tu Wong Fu. Yeah.
I
So
think of that list, the one that I've seen the most is very easily Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's
yeah,
a fantastic conclusion. Yeah.
yeah. And there's some on here that I would like to see, like well, I need to see Duke of Burgundy, but I've never seen Ed Wood. I did not know that was a LGBT movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Is it? Or am
I
I
didn't immediately clock it as that, but and it's been. I mean, when did that come out? Like in the
94?
94? Yeah,
Is it so?
I haven't seen it since 94. So I need to
Yeah. I maybe I don't know. I'd have to. I had never seen it, so I
yeah.
just kind of wrote it down. And if it's not, then I'm sorry. Sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't
there's
keep
I
it.
know I know there's yeah, there's some queer elements in it.
Okay.
I just but I hadn't thought of it as that, and that's
Yeah.
a good point though. Yeah.
I always mix it up, and it's stupid because I haven't seen Sleepy Hollow, but I mix it up with that because they both have Johnny Depp. And whenever I hear Ed Wood, I'm like, wait, is that no, that's Sleepy Hollow. I don't know. I'll watch them at some point. But anyways, why don't you plug us one more time where people can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of places you can find me. First of all, like I mentioned at the top of the show, Movie Bears podcast is the show that I do. We do a weekly, when we can, most weeks, live stream episode that then gets released on all the different podcast episodes, broadcast platforms. Just look for Movie Bears podcast. If you follow us on Facebook, you'll be able to see when our live streams go up, which is usually on Tuesday early evenings. So come hang out with us. We love live comments. Other than that, you can find us on all the normal socials. Just look for Movie Bears podcast. You can also find me on Letterboxd. I'd like to plug my Letterboxd because
Nice.
yeah,
Yes.
why not? I'm the Movie Bear there, and then you can find me on Facebook as well under William Lindis because that's my name.
Perfect. And we wish you all the best with your journey coming up and your what's going on with you and health wise. We are all thinking about you obviously and worrying and stressing, but let us do the stressing for you and you just be carefree and happy. Okay, we'll do all the stressing for you because we care about you so much. So
Thank you.
thank
That
you.
means the world to me, just to have you and the rest of this amazing like community just sort of like you know
Yeah.
carrying some of that weight and kind of behind me for all of this.
Yep.
I appreciate the hell out of
Yeah. Well, we're a little pissed that you can't get to all the movies, but
that.
we'll let you have this one because you have a
Yeah.
really good excuse. So I'm sure you're doing catch up right now, just like I am. So yes. So I will hit the outro. I just want to thank you so much for being on. This is great. I was worried at one point that this would be a 40-minute episode, and we're at an hour and a half. So that's awesome. It means we got along and we talked, and there was a lot to talk about. So thank you everyone for listening. You can find the Film Vaulters, like I said earlier, on all social medias, and you can obviously go and listen to Anderson and Brian at the Film Vault. It's Anderson Brian on Instagram and the Film Vault everywhere else on all other socials. So thank you, and we will see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Hollywood Persona podcast. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube,
Oh.
and Facebook at the Hollywood Persona.
That's the Hollywood Persona. Let me do my other outro. So I will cut that out. Jesus. Okay, that's it. Will, thank you so much. I will. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much. This was a blast.
Okay,
Yeah, this
good.
was really fun.
Yeah, I hope it didn't. I meant to tell you at the beginning, if you needed a break, just let me know. I know it's live, but if the people want to jump off or leave or whatever, I'm sorry I didn't say that. But
Oh.
you definitely said, hey, I gotta piss or something. But
Yeah.
thank you very much, and we'll talk soon, hopefully.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll talk real soon. Again, thanks so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah, good. Okay, and just don't close the laptop um, until you see that processing thing done,
Okay.
and or close out of it if you see anything. If there's any issues, just let me know. So
Okay, wonderful.
okay,
Can do.
all right, bye,
All right.
bud.
Bye-bye.
This.
Riverside.